The Leafs ink Auston Matthews to a 4-year extension. On today's show, we'll break down the deal and discuss what's next for the Leafs and Brad Treliving. All that more coming up on today's Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. It's the official sportsbook of the Locked On Network. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Dave, we finally got some news to talk about. It's been a long summer of really just finding whatever we can to try and discuss and bring to the pod that's Leafs related, but we finally got something to talk about today, so let's dive right into it. Auston Matthews has officially signed his extension. He cryptically leaked his own extension, which is cool. We'll talk about that in a moment. But 4 years, $13.25 million AAV, $53 million in total. Your thoughts?
Well, when I initially saw the Leafs tweet, first and foremost, they literally just said we signed Auston Matthews to a 4-year contract extension. There was no term, like no AAV or anything. So I had to go and find the press release, saw the term, and I saw the AAV, and I was like, it makes sense. Like, we were kind of putting ourselves down the path of this is where it was going to go, right? Freeman kept saying between 3 to 5 years, probably in the $13 million range. So if anyone's surprised that this is where it ended up being, you haven't been paying attention to the people who are been following this for the last, year?
Yeah. 100%. Like when I tweeted this out too on Twitter, like the amount of people that got in the mentions and were like, oh, not a good deal. Should have signed 8 years. How did they not get him for 8 years? It was never going to be 8 years. That wasn't an option for the Maple Leafs. You know, it was take it or leave it, a 3 to 5 year deal. And then the money was going to correspond based on, how long they were willing to go on the terms. So ultimately, I think Auston Matthews had a little bit of a bend when it came to the term. It sounded like he preferred 3 years. The Leafs preferred 5. They met in the middle. And then I'm sure the Maple Leafs pushed for a little bit lower than the 13.25 that they landed on. And I know that Auston Matthews probably preferred to get a little bit higher of an AAV. And ultimately they met somewhere in the middle and got 13.25. Like I personally thought that it was going to be a little bit higher. I thought that he could have got on a 4-year deal upwards of 13.5. It's not that much higher, but I thought that was possible that he could have asked for that and probably could have got it. But ultimately, I think he did leave a little bit of money on the table. He bent on the dollar. The Leafs bent on the term. I think it's a win-win for both parties. And Auston Matthews is now going to be a Maple Leaf for 5 years, which means that's 5 more years guaranteed that this team is going to be in cup contention.
Yeah, and a lot of good things I've been hearing, I think people need to understand is this is now will be with everything with the contract extension, 13 years of having Auston Matthews in the Leafs organization. After his, initial ELC, he didn't sign for 8 years like almost every other superstar did. If for people to say, where's the 8-year term? That's just never been his MO from the beginning. I understand people were upset that initially he didn't do the 8 years, but the player also understands that he put himself in a position for a pay raise at this point in time with his deal, right? And now the next time he looks to do it, he's going to be 30, right? And I think that's the important thing here too, is you're getting Auston Matthews' best years, right?
Yes.
We're not talking about him past his prime. He hasn't even really entered his full prime yet as a player.
He's there. Like, he's now here,
Yeah.
right? I think like last year at age 25, he
Yeah.
kind of really did enter it at having that 60 goal season last year. This year was a little bit low in terms of the goal scoring, but if you look at the metrics, I think that he was just a little unlucky this season compared to last. He still led the league in like expected goals, if you believe in that stat and whatnot. But ultimately, yeah, you're getting arguably a top 3 to 5 player in the league through his prime until he's 30, 31 years old. Like, you're exactly right. And that costs money. That's expensive. You're buying up UFA years at this point. This isn't no longer RFA years. You're buying UFA years. All 4 years are unrestricted free agent years, and those are more expensive ultimately. But I don't think 13.25 is really that egregious. Like, I think he could have got more. I legitimately believe he left a little bit of money on the table in this contract. I know that people are going to be rolling their eyes and they're saying he reset the market. He's making more money than Connor McDavid, making more money than Nathan McKinnon. How could he possibly have left money on the table if he's now the highest paid player in the NHL? Because he could have got more. Ultimately, if he really wanted to, he had all the leverage in the world. He could have got basically a blank check, and the Leafs would have had to just figure it out figure it out next season and do whatever. But ultimately, I think he left a little bit of money on the table. Not a lot of money, but a little bit of money. And hopefully, and we'll get into this a little bit later, hopefully that means the next guy, looks at that and says, okay, Auston's bought in. I'm going to buy in. I'm going to leave a little bit less as well. And ultimately, you get 4 or 5 of your big boys leaving a little bit on the table. Now you can afford, a middle 6 guy or a top 4 defenseman by adding those little extra dollars. And maybe that's how this team finally realizes that they can win. And when you look at it, it's not that big of an increase. It's only $1.6 million more.
To say, like, when you look
at like that's, it's only a $1.6 million increase. So it's not even like it's an insane, glow up in cap. I mean, you look at what happened with McKinnon, you look at what happened with Pasternak, those guys made an additional like 6, 5.
They'll double their salary in a lot of cases.
Yeah, and like that's difficult for teams to do. I mean, the Maple Leafs, it's a blessing and a curse that they've had to navigate because they signed those guys to those big deals, early right out of their ELC. But when it came to deal number 3, it's pretty easy to kind of fit that money into their cap situation, because again, it's only an additional $1.6 million. And for a guy like Auston Matthews going into his prime years, yeah, you'll pay up for that all day long. So I think ultimately, Auston Matthews has to be pretty happy with the deal. He sticks around. He'll be here for 5 more years. He wants to try and get to the mountaintop, as he said. Well, we'll pull up that tweet in just a second. And the Maple Leafs, they retain the best goal scorer in the NHL today. And he's a guy who will now again have like a chance to rewrite record books in Toronto for many, many years. I think both sides should be happy with the deal. And ultimately, I think that's why today something got signed, sealed, delivered, pen to paper. Both sides are going home happy, and the fan base should be happy too. You got Matthews for 5 more years. Okay, it's not 8, it's not 9, but guess what? He signed a 4-year deal. That's a midterm. It's not like it was a 1 or 2 year deal. 4 years is still a decently long contract. I think everybody should be happy with this situation.
Yeah. And, people are going to make comparisons with other players. You don't think Connor McDavid wouldn't like the chance to reset his market?
And he will. He will.
And he will get that chance. He has 3 more years left on his deal. But, in a way, he's like the players make the decisions themselves of what they want to do, right? Connor McDavid's like, okay, I'll sign the 8 years. Just kind of following what everyone does. I actually don't mind that Matthews says to himself, you know what? 4 years. Like, I don't think anyone should ever be questioning whether Auston Matthews has a commitment to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like, he has been committed, whether it's for 4 years, 5 years, 8 years. There is a commitment. He's signing a long-term deal. That doesn't mean he's not going to sign another extension after this again, right? Like, it gives the Leafs a little bit of flexibility too down the road, seeing where things are like in the next 5 years. Because, what if the Leafs need to potentially do a reset down the road? They want to give themselves a little bit of flexibility and not be tied up to some deals. Like, look at what Taves and Kane, what happened there in Chicago with that long-term deal. It didn't look great for them at the end because Chicago wasn't good and they were stuck with those contracts.
That's a good point. That is a good point. But, I think the Leafs are in a better spot at this current juncture. And if you want to take a look at cap percentage, I know everyone's saying, I saw a couple comments saying Connor McDavid should be the highest paid player in hockey. He's the best player. Auston Matthews should never even ask for more than what McDavid is making on an annual average salary basis. And okay, yes, Matthews is making $13.25 million, which is just under $1 million less than what Connor McDavid is making. But if you look at it in terms of cap percentage, which is realistically what most teams do nowadays, players, agents, they don't really look at it as the AAV and the cap and the total dollars as much anymore, especially when you get into like these high top echelon players. It's all about percentage of cap. And you look at what we see from Connor McDavid when he signed his deal at $12.5 million. It was 16.67% of the entire salary cap of the Edmonton Oilers the year that was signed. Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon last year when he signed his deal, $12.6 million to reset the market, become the highest paid player. Yes, he became the highest paid player, but it was at 15.27% of the cap. So the cap percentage was lower, and Auston Matthews came in sandwiched right between the two of them in terms of cap percentage at 15.87%, which totaled $13.25 million. Sure, he's making more money than both of them, but when it comes to percentage of the cap, Auston Matthews signed for less than what McDavid did. So you bet your ass that McDavid's going to reset the market in a couple of years. Draisaitl will probably reset the market when he ends up, his contract is up either next year or the year after, I believe. So it's not going to be too long that Matthews is going to be at the top of the mountain. Someone's going to come and knock him off, and we're going to kind of see things jockey for years. Bedard eventually might end up making, a nice chunk of change at some point if he can, become the player that we all expect him to become. So, yeah, I don't think that Leaf fans need to be upset with Auston Matthews. Was it an 8-year deal? No, it wasn't. But guess what? It also wasn't 14, 15, 16 million AAV, which was also something that was entirely possible. So both sides bent a little bit, and they came to an agreement. And now Toronto gets to see 4 more years, 5 years technically, of Auston Matthews. And according to Austin, try and climb the mountain. Let's pull up this tweet and talk about this really quickly, because this was something to behold. Because obviously everyone knows, right? The championship is what this team was looking for. And he said, "I want to continue this journey as a Maple Leaf in front of the best fans in hockey. I will do everything I can to help us get to the top of the mountain. GLG, Leafs forever." I can guarantee that Auston Matthews did not write this tweet. That's a PR person. And to be honest, I actually thought that this was a very fishy tweet when I saw it. And I thought he was hacked I don't know how you felt, but I legitimately thought that maybe Auston Matthews got hacked based off of this tweet, because it didn't coincide with the tweet from the team. The team tweet came by like 10 minutes later, I want to say. And then the insiders, came about a couple minutes after that with the term and dollars, but it was radio silence outside of that one singular tweet by Auston Matthews that made you kind of think, is this real? Is this fake? What's going on here? Turns out it was real. It was, he leaked his own extension, which is, as I believe I put it on Twitter, a G move for him to do.
Yeah, I was at the time that the tweet was sent out, I was working on some other news, NHL news on my front. And I saw this tweet after the fact, and I'm like, I kind of said to a coworker, you may want to prepare an Auston Matthews sign an extension. Like, better get that ready, because I think it's coming. Like,
it's coming.
That you read the tweet and you're just like I don't think anybody ever like, I don't know if this was like at first like a reassurance of his commitment to the Leafs, and I'm like, well, continue this journey. I'm like, okay, like this sounds like somebody who's prepared to announce some sort of commitment to the Leafs going forward. And I'm like, okay, this looks like a contract extension coming, which again, out of nowhere, no one was reporting that a deal was nearing. Usually hear like Freeman will put out, they're closing in on a deal. Drager or whoever, like LeBron, are saying rumblings that a deal is getting close. None of that. Auston Matthews just like, I'm going to beat everyone to the punch.
Yeah.
And put it out there. I'm sure like they agreed to the deal. He put the tweet out, but
I should have responded with a source question mark.
Yeah, that would have been a good one. Source. Yeah. No. So it's you know what, it's nice that it got broken. Probably not in the timeline that it was all anticipated on happening, but it all came together.
It did come together, and you know, he's here for 5 more years, and look, he'll have a chance to like rewrite the record books here in Toronto. Like, I was just taking a look at how close he is to a couple of like key offensive records, and he's already 5th all time in goals. He needs 122 to surpass Sundin. I mean, if he goes and gets 60 goals again, I mean, he could do this in 2 years. It's within reach for him within 2 years to get that done. Legitimately, it could be accomplished by the end of the first year of this contract. It's within reach, I would say. Only 27 more game-winning goals to pass Sundin to become the sole owner in game-winning goals. And then he's 445 points away from Sundin for all-time points. He is like neck and neck with Marner, has like 5 or 6 more points than him, actually. But you know, he could again
more games played than Matthews.
Yeah, like he could get there though. Like 445 points for, you know, a guy like that who's gonna get you 100 points a year. Like, I mean, he should be able to do that 100% by the end of the 5 years, and if he plays out that entire contract. So, you know, he's got a chance to also rewrite the record books here in Toronto, and you know, establish himself potentially as the greatest Leaf of all time. You know, there's got to be some playoff success that has to come with that, but he at least has ensured himself he's staying around long enough to put himself in that category. But can the big one come along with it? That's the big question. Can they win a championship? And to do that, do they need William Nylander in the fold to win? I don't know. Why don't we chat about that on the other side? Because that's now what everyone's looking at. Old Willie still unsigned. Matthews in the Bucks here for 5 more years. What about Willie? What's next with him? We'll get into that in a moment. But first, let me tell you guys about one of today's show sponsors. It's our good friends over at FanDuel. Football season's about to kick off, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to win all season long. Because right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. Just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you'll get bonus bets for every victory. You can use your bonus bets on spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. We are a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast here, and for the first time in a while, we had some big news break today on the show. Auston Matthews signing his extension 4 more years additional to the 1 year that he already was under, so that's 5 more seasons of Auston Matthews. But will William Nylander be joining him for those 5 years? That's the big question that we all now move toward. Is Nylander next to sign his deal? I guess my first question to you, Dave, is does it make this maybe more likely we see movement on the Nylander front, or does this maybe not change anything for you in terms of what happens with him by training camp?
Well, kind of the big news of the day before Matthews signed was Nylander getting the first chance to really talk about his own contract situation. And so I know we've seen a lot of the stories out there. I got a chance to kind of listen to what Nylander had to say and kind of the tone of it. He doesn't seem to be all that in a rush to get a deal done. And yeah, part of it's probably waiting to see what the Matthews contract was going to look like, because that makes it a little easier for him to say, okay, well, Matthews getting 13. how much can you realistically say the gap should be between Nylander and Matthews, right? That's probably what Willie's agent's saying. Like he pretty much said, this is in my agent's hands. Like, I'm not even taking part. Really, it's the agent and Brad Living that are doing this. The best part about what he had to say was, I don't understand the stress, like really people stressing about this. And it's like, well, if you saw what happened to Calgary with Johnny Gaudreau, Nylander should then understand why people are kind of stressing that a deal's not done yet.
Yeah.
Right. But what you
can go even way closer to home, man. Think about all of the Leafs free agents over the last 5-6 years that have all just walked, right? That they just weren't able to bring back, right? Tyler Bozak, JVR, right? Like, these guys just walked at the end of their contracts and didn't come back. You can go, Zach Hyman was another guy who they really wanted to bring back, but unfortunately unable to do so. Jack Campbell, they wanted to bring back, but weren't able to do so. He got a bigger deal elsewhere. So, yeah, excuse me. I mean, Michael Bunting, like Ryan O'Reilly, look at all the players that just left this past offseason that they probably would have brought back, but unfortunately went to market and other teams paid them handsomely, and they decided, you know what, we're going to actually go there instead. So excuse me, Willie, if the Maple Leafs are a little worried about you potentially doing the same thing, and the only thing that could really put Leafs Nation at ease is if you do exactly what your buddy Auston did and put a little pen to paper and also get that extension done. That's why people are worried, pal.
Yeah, like, I understand Nylander has made it clear that he only wants to be in Toronto, but there's got to be a two-way street here where, yeah, he wants to be here, but the Leafs also got to be able to afford him as well, right?
I remember Bunting said the same thing. Where's Bunting?
Yeah,
exactly. Hyman did the same thing. Where's Hymes?
Like,
words, man. They're just words. Put pen to paper. Action.
Exactly. Like, people can continue to say, I want to be here, I'm sure at one point, John Tavares told the Islanders, yeah, I want to be here. And he wasn't there, right? I'm sure Johnny Gaudreau at one point kind of made it known that maybe I want to make things work in Calgary. And he didn't. He left them for Columbus. Like, it's one of those where I get why Nylander's never been that type of guy to really be worried about anything. You've seen him, or maybe you've talked to him more than I have.
Yeah.
He doesn't seem to be a guy that allows a lot of outside noise to get to him.
Dude, he honestly feels like he's a dude who just happens to be good at hockey, but like he just wants to live his life.
Yeah.
Like, hockey's his job. Doesn't feel like it's his life and his passion. That's not to mean that he doesn't take it seriously at all, but he has other passions outside of hockey, and it's very evidently so. Like, you look at what he's up to this summer and you watch on Instagram what he's doing. You know, he's not a guy who's in the gym 24/7 in the off season. Is he keeping up with workouts? Probably, possibly. He's just not posting about them. But he's also in Ibiza. He's out partying in Stockholm. He's enjoying himself the way that he's allowed to and he's able to, right? So it's not necessarily that I think he is, not worried about getting a contract done. But I just think that he's just so nonchalant that he believes if it happens, it'll happen. Yeah. It's just kind of the way he is. That's his vibe. Go with the flow. He's chill. Chill is the operative word.
It really is. And so, and I'm fine with that if he is totally committed to making a deal work.
Yeah.
Right. And there was a question that Freeman had asked Nylander where he says, are you worried at all that this doesn't work out and you could be traded? And funny thing is, he kind of let out a little bit of I wouldn't say a laugh, but kind of didn't kind of just brushed it off. Like, I just think that he understands his position. He understands that he is in a position where, the Leafs might be sweating it out, but he's not going to sweat out because he knows that a team could offer him a deal that he wants.
Right.
I think there's a little bit of that there too, right?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think barring a massive injury, which is always a risk, I suppose, that a player is taking, Nylander has more to gain by waiting. The Leafs have nothing to gain. Nothing. Like, at all. They want to try and get this done as soon as possible. So, of course, the Leafs and Leafs Nation are going to be a little weary and a little jittery about this and Nylander, nonchalant. I mean, if there's one player on this team who I would not be worried about playing in a contract year, like not getting to him mentally, and he could go out there and probably overperform in a contract year, it is this guy. It's William Nylander. Like, he's just doesn't matter what's going on. He's just going to be Willie and do his thing. So, yeah, I could totally see that not being even remotely a concern for William Nylander. But the team, I'm sure, would like to still get something done by training camp. And if I am Brad Treliving, now that I've got Matthews done, it's a full court press to try and get Nylander done in the next couple of weeks before they have to get back for training camp. Full court press.
Yeah, I just think if you're Brad Treliving, you don't want to go into the season with that. The team constantly have to answer for it. He have to answer it every time. He has to face the media. Like, I think the Leafs will try to push to get this done.
Yeah,
sooner rather than later. And I'm hoping a resolution comes because, like, let's say the Leafs decide, you know what, we're not taking that risk and we want to move him. You have to make that decision at a point where it makes sense and other teams that you want to talk to can conceivably make a deal work as well.
Yeah. Are you I guess, like, when we think about everything we've heard over the course of the last, calendar year, I suppose, was Matthews, and even like the last couple of months, Matthews, that deal's pretty well done. Like, that's canned. Like, it's going to happen. No one was worried about Matthews, where Nylander, no one really had a good grasp of what's going on there. But are you at all surprised that the Matthews deal was the first one to get done, or did you fully expect for that to be the case?
I expected Matthews to be first just because it seemed like they already had everything kind of laid out. It was just a matter of getting those final details done. I think the framework was a lot easier for Matthews one.
Yeah.
I think finding the right term and number for Nylander is tough. Yeah, we brought up comparables that you can look at, but like, it's really tough because I can't directly compare Nylander to another player, right? Auston Matthews, you're putting him up with the top centers in the league. You're putting him in the Nick McKinnon, the McDavids. Like, that's an easy one. With Nylander, it's like, okay, we got some players that you can conceivably say this is the range, but they're not exactly direct comparables in terms of how he plays as well.
Right.
So that's why I think this one's a tougher one, just because, he's in a different tier than Auston Matthews, right?
And just to play devil's advocate a little bit, that's kind of why I thought maybe we would see the Nylander contract done first, because that was the tougher one. Let's try and get that one out of the way, and then let's put the final touches on Auston, on Matthews. That one's pretty much like at the 10-yard line. We can finish that up in a little bit. Let's see if we can try and hammer out this Nylander extension. And maybe that was the case, because the last 2 months we heard, to your point, 3 to 5 years, 13 to 14 million. We knew it was going to land somewhere in between there. They just had to figure that out. That was simple. But both sides agreed, we will find a number that works in between these numbers. For that reason, I thought maybe they could put Matthews on the back burner and try and attack Nylander. And maybe that is what happened. And maybe that's why it took all the way until, what was today, August 23rd, to finally announce Auston Matthews after, a month and a half of speculation on a deal. Maybe that is what ended up happening. But ultimately, I guess it doesn't really matter. I'm curious now, though, like, if Auston, left a little bit of money on the table, does that maybe set the tone, and maybe now Nylander doesn't need to completely extort the Maple Leafs here, and maybe he leaves a little bit of money on the table and is now a little more willing to take 9.25 as opposed to the 10 that he wants.
It could. I just think, like, you think back to that last contract negotiation, like somebody eventually decided to break, right? Like Nylander took it all, and the Leafs took it all the way to the hour, and then somebody decided to finally bring it. We don't know exactly who it was that did it, and that's the part where I wonder is, like, Nylander seems to be very content to let this ride out as long as it needs to.
Yeah.
And that's probably because he's going to probably try to get what he thinks he can get. Unfortunately, I just don't know if that's going to be available to him, because I do think the Mitch Marner one contract is another one that you have to think about in some ways, because we know that while Nylander believes he deserves more, there's always been one player who's reportedly believes that he should be almost close to what Matthews is. And that's Marner. Like, remember, as soon as Matthews signed his deal, Marner's agent came out and said, no hometown discount. That's because Marner believes he is closer to Auston Matthews. I don't know if William Nylander thinks of it that way, right? And that's why I think that maybe what's out there might be just, the agent throwing that out there and trying to get his client a better deal, right? I don't know if Nylander really views it that way. It was hearing him how his persona is. It doesn't scream to me, but maybe I'm reading him. Maybe I'm reading him wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll find out. Like, neither of us are in those negotiation rooms. We have no idea what's going on. Ultimately, nobody does, except for Willie, Louis Gross, and Brad Treliving, right? And probably a couple other people. But, for the most part, that's really all that knows exactly what's going on here in the Nylander talks. But I think I believe I speak for everyone when I say, hopefully, now that Matthews is put to bed, they can really get something done with Nylander. And nobody wants to go into this season without this guy under contract. From a Maple Leafs perspective, Willie, different story. I think day by day he gains more, advantage realistically. But we'll see. We'll see if they can get something done now that Matthews is in the books, and maybe it's even more attractive for Willie. Okay, Matthews here for 5 years. Maybe I'll go for another 5 years as well. So now they have maybe a term in mind for Nylander, or 4 years, whatever it may be. There's a term for him to maybe now kind of link up with Auston Matthews there, and they can both hit the market again in 4 years and see where the Maple Leafs are at that point. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what comes of it. Anything else you want to share on either of these two players before we take off for the day?
I'll just say, for the Leafs fans that don't seem to be happy, like, try to find some semblance of peace, and that you don't have to hear about a contract extension for Auston Matthews impending. Like,
Matthews
try to
here for 4 more years. He could have been gone next summer.
You got him for 5 more years.
5 more years. Yes.
Right?
That's what you need to be happy about. Who cares that it's not 8? Who cares?
It could have been how much money he makes. Like, hockey players get vastly underpaid in comparison to other athletes.
Did you see that? Did you see that stat?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Let me pull up this stat, and I'll read it to everyone kind of watching or listening here. So, yes, Auston Matthews is the highest paid NHLer at $13.5 million. But that would make him, if you look into the other 3 major sports in America, the 113th highest paid player in the NBA, the 103rd highest paid player in Major League Baseball, and that would make him the 88th highest paid player in the NFL. So basically, yeah, he's making so much money as a hockey player, because, I mean, NHLers are grossly underpaid when you consider, what the rest of the athletes are making around, pro sports. But regardless, like, it's just can't be mad that he's making that much money. That's what superstars should make. They should make more. Ultimately, he's worth more. 1,000% he's worth more than that. So being able to get him locked in at a reasonable number like that, with the salary cap just going to keep going up and up and up and up and up, that deal will look less daunting each and every season, right? So I think it's a good contract on both sides. They got it done. Leaf fans should be happy. Austin should be happy. And the Leafs, as an organization, should be stoked about that too. So hopefully, though, because at the end of the day, 5 years from now, when we look back on this deal, people are going to care about one thing. Did they win a championship?
Exactly.
Ultimately. So that's got to be the goal for everybody here, is how can we move forward and put ourselves into championship contention, keep that window open, and try and deliver one to the city for the first time since 1967. That has to be the goal from here on out. You're paid. You're here. Now let's go win. Willie, jump on board or don't. Up to you ultimately.
Yep.
Let's win a championship. That's what they got to do here. All right, buddy. Good stuff. We weren't expecting for this to kind of news to drop to be the podcast for today, but hey, when news breaks, we got to get it.
Which means that Fan Friday will be delayed till next time. Hope you guys understand that one.
Yes, and we'll do Fan Friday next week. But for Monday, actually, let's do a mailbag Monday. Kind of see if we can get some questions from you guys. We'll post a video, so kind of make sure you're subscribed to the channel. A little notification bell as well, so when we upload new videos. We'll post a video asking for your questions, and you can also reach us on social media as well to ask the questions for the mailbag episode, which we'll be doing on Monday. But that'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcasting platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti. Follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for y'all on Monday. Until then, enjoy the weekend. And we'll be back on Monday, as I said. Until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.